To discuss the French elections and the good run for the rand today in the wake of that first round of polling. We're joined by Chief Economist at Econometrics, Azar Jammine. Great to have you with us.
Thank
Azar,
you, Francis.
Is all this exuberance around Emmanuel Macron justified?
Yes, I think it is justified, because the fear was that if Marine Le Pen had done a good showing and was set to become president, that would threaten the continuity of France within the EU. And you know, Britain's fine. Britain was never really considered to be part and parcel of the EU. Somehow, you know, people always felt that the British wanted to be out of it. But the French are part of the heart of the integral. Yeah. The axis France-Germany is integral to the whole concept of European Union. It stems from the end of the Second World War, where the two antagonists had to be brought together. And
there's still a second round, but at least the polls were right. So I think the markets are also quite confident in that.
It's more than that. It's not only that the polls were right. People were terrified of the possibility that you'd get a showdown between right-wing Marine Le Pen and left-wing head of Mélenchon from the Communist Party, and then who would people pick between the two? Probably Le Pen, and that was the big disaster. And what has happened since the election is that the other leading candidates have pledged their support for Macron. And that makes it almost certain that Macron will win the presidential election. Yeah.
So this has been great for the rand, and it's really, among a lot of other things, overshadowing the downgrades, the cabinet reshuffle, things like that. Can it last?
I don't think it can last for too long. It can last for a little while longer. You've got to bear in mind that in the same way as the rand is often used as a proxy to sell emerging market assets and currencies when emerging markets are out of favor. Conversely, now it's one of the favorites, because of its higher level of liquidity, to get into emerging markets. And right now, people are actually seeing emerging markets as a flavor of the month. They're suddenly waking up to the fact that actually emerging markets are likely to do better than advanced economies in coming years.
Even if we're in junk status?
Well, yeah, it doesn't matter that South Africa's in junk status. It's a liquid market. Get into emerging markets, buy whatever can give you that liquidity, and that is the rand.
Given all the predictions before the downgrades of how basically cataclysmic they could be, I was trying to explain this to myself, what's going on right now. Either it was never going to be that bad, or we are simply, like you say, being caught up in other global factors that are good for us, or the effects could still be coming. Where do you stand?
The effects could still be coming. What people haven't realized is that we haven't reached the worst stage as far as credit rating downgrades go. Yes, Fitch downgraded us to junk status on both our local and foreign currency debt. But what people don't realize is that even though Standard & Poor's Global Ratings downgraded us to junk status on our foreign debt, they have persistently kept local currency ratings one notch above foreign currency ratings. And given that foreigners own, that 90% of what foreigners own in South African debt is local currency, we're still at investment grade as far as S&P go. And then the other big rating agency, Moody's, is 2 notches above investment grade. So we haven't really reached junk status across the board yet at all.
So it could be a step deterioration.
And what is serious about having them all downgrading us, especially S&P and Moody's, if we get junk status on our local currency debt, then South Africa falls out of the World Government Bond Index of the Citigroup, and that could lead to sales of up to $10 billion in our local currency debt. And that is why it is so important that Malusi Gigaba try and restore some confidence to prevent that further downgrade in our rating.
And investors are watching our politics very closely. So something else maybe overshadowed by the French election was Cyril Ramaphosa's quite strong statements. Some saying he's sounding presidential, he's putting himself out there, he's being critical of President Jacob Zuma. And I don't know if you agree with me, but markets always seem to like signs that the president could be leaving. Do you see any local factors playing out?
I think that is an important factor that has contributed towards some optimism right throughout. Part of the reason why the rand has not fallen out of bed is because foreigners still perceive that there's a fair chance that Zuma might not see it through the end to the end of his presidency, certainly of the ANC and maybe of the country as well. But, you know, we're going to have to wait and see. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that uncertainty was thrown into even greater turmoil by the appointment of Chris Malikane as Chief Economic Advisor to the Minister of Finance, which in turn raised the possibility of nationalization. But again, the Minister of Finance came out rapidly and kind of said, no, I've got to keep him quiet.
So that rhetoric is important. We are going to play out an interview that our US correspondent did with Malusi Gigaba, but later. Final question for you. President Donald Trump talking about tax cuts to be announced on Wednesday. Will this finally be something that really impresses after all his promises? Well,
he may announce those tax cuts, but as we saw with his attempt at adjusting the healthcare bill, it's not at all certain that his own colleagues in the Republican Party in Congress will necessarily go with those tax cuts to the extent that Trump might want. Yes, tax cuts sound like music to corporates' ears, but, you know, we have to still wait to see just how far he manages to get by with it.
Isn't this way less controversial, though, than healthcare and things like that? And if it goes through, the question is, will it reignite that Trump trade? Will markets just continue to perform very well this year?
Yes, there is a chance that it will reignite that Trump trade. The irony here is that it could swing the other way for the rand if people start then anticipating that US interest rates will have to rise by more than they had anticipated previously. That could be negative for emerging markets. So, yeah, it's terribly difficult at this stage.
So uncertain. Yeah. But a good day on the markets today. Thank you for your analysis, Azar Jammine from Econometrics.